listening to Parent Projects.
Hey, welcome in this week, everybody. There are a lot of factors to consider in taking over a mortgage. Before death, after death for your parents, it's really just not as simple as whether or not you can afford it. And today we're going to talk through what some of those factors are with Danielle Miura, Spark Financial in California. Pleased to have her here. Why are we even keeping the house? Taxes, maintenance, lifestyle? There's a couple other questions to ask, and you're going to learn them before you get out of here today. So stay tuned with Danielle Miura on Parent Projects.
You're listening to Parent Projects, a family media and technology group production. Now here's your host, Tony Siebers.
Okay, so you want to take over your parents' mortgage. And maybe there's probably two audiences of that. You're thinking maybe it's before they passed away and they can't afford the mortgage, or there's some challenge to that. Perhaps it's after they passed away, and there's just a lot of emotion that's coming your direction. You're working through this. You just know you can't lose the family house or where those things are at. There's some great questions to ask. There's probably some questions you might not have considered. And today we're going to break those questions down with Danielle Miura, who's going to help us handle that. She's a professional fiduciary and a CFP in California. For those of you joining from that area, hello. For those of you in Arizona, just continue to work through. You may have a CFP or somebody you're working with. Understand the context of this. Whichever state you might be in, I think you're going to find this super, super valuable. And Danielle, thanks so much for joining us and helping us break down just that first question that hits the mind and what we should be thinking. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. You are, talk to us about you're in California. You're, I think, a CFP by trade. And Spark Financial. Tell us a little bit about what you do at Spark Financial. Tell us how you came to focusing and an understanding of what a parent project is, or dealing with parents or grandparents.
Definitely, I'd love to tell you. So I became a CFP and started my firm located in the Central Valley of California. And the main goal was to help educate people about minimizing taxes and helping prepare for the retirement plan. Mm-hmm. And then my loved one fell on tile floor and she ended up breaking her hip. And I started looking through resources to help myself as a family caregiver. And I really happened to find barely any resources. They just led to either government links or just random links that didn't really provide me with great resources. And so that's how I came about helping other caregivers not only prepare for planning for their finances and financial wellness, but helping pre-retirees plan for their soon-to-be caregivers.
What was one of the, I mean, how'd you end up in the CFP and that approach versus all the kind of things? Was it you go to school that's already where you were, your practice, that was your energy around that? Or is that something in particular you found kind of lacking and decided to put focus on that?
I wish I could tell you it's a great story, but I gave birth in Japan, and when my daughter was 100 days old, we came back to the United States, and I was trying to figure out my next career path. And as a mother who's taking care of a child, sometimes you have to transition your life. And my husband said, we're planning for our financial planning. We want to create our own plan to help not only with our future, but our family's future. And he's like, why don't you just take the courses and see if you're interested in them and go from there? And then I happened to really enjoy the CFP educational courses, and that's where I am today.
I love that. That the passion that grows off of that, I think particularly when we talked before, and even before the show, and previously in your kind of how your approach is in understanding you ask some of those, you ask some great questions, some prodding, some why questions sometimes when it comes through. And one of the first questions I heard in feedback here, and you start looking at taking over a mortgage, is okay, what's the situation before death, after death, two very different things, but digging then into and some of the content of what that might be. Other questions they should ask themselves before death: what's the lifestyle? What are you trying to do? Why are you keeping the house? Does it fit into those things? After death, where does grief sit within that? How do those things come about? So I'm really looking forward to unpacking a couple of those lanes with you today as we get into our conversation.
Yeah, as I usually tell clients, I do ask a lot of personal questions, but I always have a reason behind them. And usually the main reason is because as financial planners, we want to really get to know our clients because we
Yeah.
want to give them proper advice. We don't
Yeah.
sometimes proper advice is not always the best financial, isn't going to give you the best financial return, but it's the best solution for you in your situation.
I think that's a really good aspect to understand. Boy, I can't imagine how hard that's got to be too from finance folks to understand that, or in obviously probably a way that you came into finance as a labor of love, but that especially because the emotions that are involved when you're trying to not only manage your own finance, but now you're not without, maybe commingling is not the best way, but now you're really starting to see a family member's finances and your finances as they come next to each other. Gives a lot of opportunity for people to make decisions on feelings instead of facts or kind of emotions from that. And you got to sort those out with people and understand, probably separate those. I imagine that's probably a big part of how you do what you do.
Yeah, definitely. So as I said, as caregivers, our finances are intermingled with our loved ones' finances.
Yeah.
And it's like one without the other. They're interconnected. And what I'm going to do in my life, let's say, for example, I bought my loved one some new technology to make her life more comfortable. So I have to think of my finances in providing her with technology that will help her live a more comfortable life.
Yeah.
And we're interconnected. There's no one way or the highway. It's we're working together towards a mission to help each other.
I love that. There is a give take off of both sides for those, and there is, I think, recognizing that might also help explain some of the emotions and the feelings behind what leads to the questions, like taking over a parent's mortgage or helping a parent with financial or medical assistance or late in life debt or other challenge that is there. One major emotion I think we hear people talk about often is the feeling of guilt if they haven't kind of grasped with that up front. The guilt's playing a role and they don't really understand where the role is. They know what their obligations might be or they know what they want to do. And sometimes separating the two or having a good, honest conversation with somebody else who's asking questions is easier than us sitting down and struggling with that question with ourselves.
Definitely. Emotions play a big part in finance. There's a lot more research on the psychology behind finance than there ever was. And just as caregivers, we really want the best for our loved ones. That's why we're in the caregiver position.
Completely.
But we also have to take time to protect ourselves as well, and time to really determine if the decisions we're making are based off of emotions or if they're based off of what we actually need to do, what's best for our loved one.
I love that. So when we come back, we're going to take our first break here and get set up to have that conversation. When we do come back, expect to break down some of those emotional conversations, some of those things to think with. And we're going to help you unpack that depending on which side of the ball, maybe before or after death, when you're trying to help a loved one. And this is the Parent Projects podcast. Stay tuned.
Are you looking for more information about healthcare, senior housing, municipal services, recreation, technology, transport, or entertainment for your adult children? Then welcome to the All Things Senior Expo. The All Things Senior Expo is held at the Scottsdale Center of Performing Arts in Scottsdale, Arizona. Vendors will come and showcase their products, services, or programs to attendees. This event is sponsored by Parent Projects, CoClear, and Love and Life After 50. If you're a vendor and would like to talk about your products, Parent Projects will be there live and conducting interviews. If you wish to schedule an interview with Parent Projects Live at the All Things Senior Expo, please go to parentprojects.com/allthingssenior to find out more and schedule your interview. We look forward to seeing you there. Behold and beheld.
And welcome back. This week, we're breaking down that first question you may have come at us with taking over a parent's mortgage. Now, whether it be before or after death, they both share kind of the same thing, and that there's some emotion that's involved. And we're going to break through a couple of those things to help you get to the root of the answer for your question that makes sense for your specific circumstances. I'm joined by Danielle Miura and of Spark Financial out of California. Again, Danielle, thanks for joining us. Let's break down. Let's say this is before mom and dad pass away, and we are considering a challenge. I guess I'll throw out a case study to start walking off of. We're walking through. I can see my parents are going to struggle with their finances coming through. The family home is something that means something to me personally. I don't want to see it lost. Mom still wants to stay at home. That is, that's autonomy for her. What are the emotions that I might be processing, or what are the things and financial decisions I need to be thinking about if I'm thinking, okay, well, the easiest step is for me to take over a $700 mortgage or a $1,000 mortgage or something.
It might at first initiate the shock of, is that something that I really need to do? Have I looked at all the details to really discover whether I need to take care of the mortgage or not? Am I comfortable taking care of the mortgage? What is the state of my loved one? Is this a proper place for them to age in place? And I'll give you an example of that. So for example, when I have local clients, I might seem odd, but I walk through their house. I see their photos that they're displayed. It's all part of a personal process. I look at their backyard. What I'm looking for is to see, do they have a bedroom, like a master suite on the first floor, or is it on the second floor? Is their home ADA approved? Can they easily get around with a wheelchair, or are there steps into the house? What does their backyard look like? Is it going to be a lot of maintenance? So those are the types of things that I think of. And then I think of, if this is really the place that your loved one wants to stay and die in, how can you make that property an age in place, a place for them to be comfortable in? It's not going to be perfect, but at least be decently comfortable.
That's great. So in acknowledging, I guess you're going to acknowledge you have emotion, but then you're really getting some of those crux details. How can you get a better understanding of what the financial picture might look like?
So my suggestion, I call it an in case I die file. May sound really morbid, but the goal of the file is to collect all the documents together so that when you have a health situation, a health scare, or you need someone to take care of you, you have a file together, put away so that they can take care of you. And this is something that I talk about with every client because we never know when uncertain things may happen. So planting the seeds with your loved one ahead of time to try to dig information, financial information. You may not get it all at the first try, but start asking like if questions, like if you happen to go in the hospital, where can I find out what your medications are? Which doctors do you prefer? Who's going to be, how can I get your monthly bills? So if you're away for more than a couple of days, I can make sure your bills are paid for. Just kind of start with those if then scenarios. And then if that doesn't work, you can also try I saw something in the news. They said that, I'm just making a hypothetical situation.
Yeah. Sure.
Like nursing homes in our area are really poor. This is, they're low on staff. They're not getting paid as well. What How do you want to be treated when it comes to long-term care?
Yeah.
How can we take care of you so that you're properly cared for? And do you have the resources to pay for those things?
I love that. I love the specifically the use of the I've obviously got a military background, so I almost would say a war gaming of kind of working your way through that hypothetical. Hey, in this case, how would you want to do this? And in this case, how would you want to do that? What I particularly like is wrapping that conversation under the idea of collecting everything you need for the "What if I die" file. We used to hand out at Parent Projects previously with Senior Moves. We had these folders that were colored very specifically, and we had boxes also that you could use that were colored very specifically, where family would know when I came into a house, you could say, "Hey, you're going to go to the pink box. That's got everything you need in it. That pink box is where everything's at. It's easy to find. It sits on a bookshelf and where it is." And the exercise of collecting stuff for the pink box is a phenomenal opportunity for you to start having these if-then conversations, right? So you have a copy of the will. Great. Here's a copy of the will. Hey, when was the last time you went through this? Has this worked through? Does this all
Yeah.
stand? Right. Hey, I noticed in here you've got such and such. What do you want done if that's not the condition? If when the next time we take this box off the shelf, we don't look like this anymore, how would you solve that problem? How would you expect that? I
Yes.
like that reflecting. Yeah.
Coming from a loving perspective, an open conversation of, I really want to help you and really want to be there for you. But in order to
Yeah.
do that, um, I need some documents. You can't do it alone. You can't search things from the web, unfortunately, and figure some things, but not all things.
Right.
And you don't want to be the one who's snooping for documents at last minute, like a police officer or, a detective trying to figure things out. Um, so it's best not to, as I said, plant seeds um, in a loving, caring manner rather than an attacking manner, and come at it from a third person party perspective rather than, did you do this?
Right.
Did you put these documents together? And then you can start making mental notes for yourself of, you can ask like, how do you pay? Which company do you go through with your mortgage? You could say,
Right.
I use
Right.
this mortgage company. They're really great. Like, which one do you use? And then you can start collecting the mortgage information. I just refinanced my house. It's at
Yeah.
this interest. Like, did you consider this? Like, try to um dig, but it's not like it's a subtle dig, not an aggressive dig.
Without a doubt. And we're coming up on tax season, which is another good opportunity. I've personally used in my situations. I've utilized the tax season as an opportunity to get caught up. There's an accountant that handles this and handles my family members' taxes that they've had for a long time, and that's the long-standing person. But as we got to start putting documents together, pulling those 1099s and all of the all the W2s together, all that kind of stuff, these are a phenomenal opportunity to get an understanding of how things might sit out there. And it's complicated. Like it is complicated. And I think when I just sat through, not trying to dig or work off of it, I just simply was that person who was trying to collect them and get them in one place. This was something they knew had to happen every year.
Yeah.
And it was a difficult, and it used to be easier. Everybody used to mail them. And I think still most people mail, but email counts. And so, you'll see as they get older, in fact, many companies I think are really running into this problem. Banks, financial institutions, and others that might have a 1099 INV or a 1099, interest, a 10, some other type of 1099s or firm, they'll utilize an email and they'll send it with a link that goes out that requires them to go log in. And that can, I mean, there's a time you're going to reach where that kind of becomes non-obtainium. Like that's not going to happen. And so someone's got to go through and start pulling that together, and it can help you understand, where that is, or unfold some of those questions. And what I found in one particular case was, instead, while I just was simply assembling, I wasn't even trying to dig. I was just trying to assemble at the backside. I found that provided relief, because they were really scared about having to go figure out how to go find these things, because that meant they had to go to that box upstairs and start typing stuff into it and remember passwords that they didn't remember, that they thought they had written down, but then it sends a recovery over to this account. And how does that work? That is, I get lost in it sometimes. So that's great.
There's a lot of information you can gather from having to go through someone's tax returns. Not only do you have documents you can put together, so let's say they have a 1099 and then they have Social Security. So it's most likely they'll have the same income for the recurring year. So you can project your income. You can also ask, which tax professional do you use? If they've allowed you, you not only have a professional contact that you can reach, if they're allowing you to pull, like the loved one is allowing you to pull their tax information, you can get tax years from several years of their tax filing. So you can gather information. So there's resources you can go for help. What I worry about is that a lot of people were mostly do things by mail. So you could kind of figure things out as you're pulling the mail, like where their accounts are, who they are, what their income is. But as things are slowly shifting from mail to, as you said, email and accounts, like most tax forms through brokerage firms are through the account, not through mail, because they usually charge more to go through the mail. So then there's going to come a problem eventually where you're going to have to start gathering account information, passwords, and usernames so you can find a way to get into those accounts if needed.
That's a good thing to plan for in the front end. So there's a platform. Let's say that you're watching this, you're coming to us, and it's not tax season. It doesn't make sense for you to start talking about taxes or pulling it together. There's platforms like Intuit. It creates Mint, right? Something, a platform that can allow you to at least get visibility on your accounts in one place, or maybe as you start collecting it, then transferring. I know one thing that we did was, once we found those accounts, once I had the conversations with, so who manages this fund? Who manages, your teacher retirement fund? Who manages this fund or that fund? Then I could understand those things. We started loading them in there. It gave us visibility over the year, as opposed to having to, we had no control, and we didn't want control. Still totally had control over everything happening in their life. We wanted to be able to see if something wasn't checking right? Or if all of a sudden a big chunk of money that she really was going to count on disappeared out of an investment side, or mandatory disbursements. When we start hitting those ages where you have to take mandatory disbursements off of your IRAs, having those conversations and figuring those things out. What's your understanding of of those types of platforms?
Yeah, there's several. I would say at the minimum, everyone should have accounts on their alerts on their credit card. At the minimum, have text alerts, call alerts when there's a minimum amount that's been withdrawn. Depending on your loved ones, if there's any cognitive issues, you may need to look at other softwares about alert systems. And then you may also consider, how does my loved one want to be treated? And sometimes, even though I think Mint is a great program, it may not be suited for everybody. They may not want people to know those details until they have no choice. And so finding something that you're both comfortable with, depending on what your relationship is.
That, I could go, man, a million places of that. What I do want to circle back through is, so today, our audience is here looking at taking over a parent's mortgage specifically. So let's say they start pulling this stuff together. They've got the mortgage statements. They now have a pretty clear picture of what the finances look like. This seems like the home would be able to. This is a realistic solution. This is a place that they can stay at least for now or for a time period. Are so they understand why they're keeping and working. What are other things they want to think about? You said you walk through a house and you're looking at all this stuff. What are the other things in taking over the mortgage payment and staying at home we want to think about generally from a financial perspective?
How you value the property. So how you as
Okay.
an individual, some people think that their loved one's home is the family compound. It's something that they
Uh,
want to keep in the family forever. It's going to be a vacation home where, siblings can come and have a vacation and relax. Um, Depending on how long that property's been with the family, there might be emotional value to the property. It may not be as easy as my loved one transferred to a nursing home. They may not be able to go back to the home. Um, Someone may have to take over the mortgage because currently the loved one's not paying for it, and we want to keep it within the family.
okay.
And then,
Are there? Oh, sorry.
yeah, us. And then it's also siblings. Are siblings together as a team willing to contribute together to pay off the mortgage?
Right. There is, I mean, you were talking an emotion, and actually, up till this point, we probably just tackled it in how you're processing with your family member off of there. But remembering that if you've got siblings in particular, they each have their own kind of pathway, lifeline, and thoughts against that. And that may become more important to them as well. So you may have a sibling that this is incredibly important to them. I have two children that I personally delivered in my house, right? I brought them into this world inside this house that we've lived in now for a decade. And it means something to them. In fact, my 10-year-old the other day told me that he gets a little stressed out when we look at a house and we're driving by and we're like, "Ooh, that's really nice." I like the yard or where this thing is. And he literally in the back, he's like, "This is stressing me out. Can we stop looking at houses?" so let's say his sister, the oldest daughter, is the one that steps in and is dealing with this, and she doesn't have that value, right? She's off rocking it in South Dakota and loves her life over there. And Phoenix, Arizona is not her bottle of wax. Are there other things that they're thinking about, tax implications to handling something like this, or other things that we should be thinking about as we're also accommodating our siblings?
Yeah, so there are some tax benefits with taking over a mortgage. If you can prove that you paid for the mortgage, so you may be able to deduct the interest. If you can prove that you paid for property taxes, you can deduct the taxes as well, but it's an itemized deduction, not a
Okay.
standard deduction. So if your standard deduction is higher, the itemized deductions may not help you unless we're talking about the state return. So, like depending on which states, there might be some credits or deductions you can apply, but not every state is different. So depending on what your income is and the taxes and the mortgage interest on the property may depend, how much you're able to get. If 75% of the property is already paid off or, 90%, there may not be that much property taxes, depending on how the state evaluates property taxes. Maybe it's like 2 to 3,000 because it was valued based on when they bought the property back in, 20, 30 years ago. Who
Right.
knows? So those are the
Yeah.
details you have to think. It may not be tax beneficial to everybody.
Well, and if they're like me, you kind of work real hard to keep those taxes minimized, right,
Yeah.
throughout the course of your life. So it's not like you're trying to give your kids a really good tax benefit, and so you want the government to jack up your taxes. So that can conflict. Well, those are awesome. I think those are great perspectives to think through those. Let's shift gears a little bit to the family who's processing. Maybe it's immediately after death, knowing and setting aside that how probate might work if a home's in probate or if a home was in a trust or how it was titled or those types of financial planning things. How just in I guess in general, maybe this audience that's coming here and taking over a parent's mortgage is, I'm going to guess that the house meant something to them, that they're even asking about how to do this. This is something that they know that they want to do. If it's post the loss, what are some of the key things that that you as a as a, whether you're acting as a fiduciary or just as a CFP, what are the things that you're going to remind the family to think about?
So I'm going to first suggest that they call the mortgage company and get details.
Uh,
Find
know what you're dealing with.
dig and
Yeah.
get the facts. Because I can't give advice unless I have the full picture. So I'm going to ask, what mortgage payments are left? Have you filed the paperwork with the mortgage company to see, to file their death? Is there someone co-listed? Is a spouse co-listed on the account? Is there, maybe somebody else, like a child listed as a co-lister? So those are the things that I'm considering first and getting more detail. And then is the mortgage company willing to work with you to not pay the mortgage for a couple months? Like, can they delay you paying it so that you can focus on yourself and take care of yourself and then make the decision of what you want to do? Some, depending on the mortgage company, some are going to be more lenient than others. But if you can have a couple months to kind of close up the property, take all the spoiled food out of the refrigerator and, and secure the property, you can take a couple months to figure out what you really want to do with it. You can, walk through the hallway and see the pictures on the wall. You can, clean it up and really have that time to really grieve. Maybe I know someone has like an altar that she set up with her loved ones' pictures, just have like that peaceful moment, the last moments that you may have in that house. And then you can really decide if I want to keep it or not.
Yeah, I think providing that room for grief and to temper it. I mean, well, first, it's a good, true, and right thing to do to handle the grief from that, and it's going to be a natural thing that you're gonna have to come with. But remembering that if you're looking at it from a financial decision, from that you're about to commit a significant portion of finance, at least to take over that mortgage or to acquire the property, it is important to make sure you're trying to put emotion in its proper place so that you can act as much as possible. Again, kind of coming back to that one of those first points you talked through, and understanding, setting aside that emotion, get the facts, know what you're dealing with. Do you find generally what types of documents, or what would we need to talk to, you could think of that we might need to talk to a mortgage company? I love the fact of proactive communication about what's going on with a company like that.
Yeah, I often find that those who are not proactive are the ones who have trouble. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I'm just saying it doesn't hurt to ask.
Right.
It doesn't hurt to ask, can I delay my payment for a month? It doesn't hurt to say, my loved one passed away. What are my options? Because if you're just going to let things reside and not make an initiative to call those mortgage companies, you may not need any documents. You may have just the slip of their mortgage payment, and that's all you may have. Their account number, their basic information. Some may not have any, especially going through the probate process. If you haven't had financial conversations with your loved one, you may not know anything about their mortgage. You may not know who the company is. You may be scurrying through documents to try to figure out who the mortgage company is, or they may send you a letter in the mail of saying you haven't paid the mortgage in the last 3 weeks. You may, that's maybe where you find out whether they have a mortgage. You may not even know they have a mortgage or not because you haven't had those types of conversations. And that's why it goes back to, what we discussed earlier of digging just slightly and trying to figure out that information. So you're not that person at the end of the day that's trying to dig at last minute, trying to find that information, because no one wants to be put in that situation.
That early communication, huge. I utilize self-directed IRAs to do good with my retirement funds. And one of the first investments I ever did was a family who didn't have that conversation ahead of time, and dad paid his mortgage annually. He wrote a check once a year, And so
Mhm.
it slipped through the cracks of everything. It missed probate. It missed all kinds of stuff. And nobody was even tracking because they hadn't had the conversation, and they needed help. They ended up getting behind, and he kind of drifted into this. The mortgage drifted into this really kind of obscure, weird world for the bank. It wasn't quite big enough to really care and big enough to not care, and so it floated there. But the house meant something to the family at the time, and they actually was somebody, if I remember right, this is years ago now, but there was one family member who was living in it and wanted to be able to continue. They'd been a caregiver for him as he passed away, and they needed time to grieve and to kind of pack their stuff or figure what they were going to do next and their next chapter of life out. And that was, it reminded me of that would be to your points earlier. That's a great reason to have that what if. How would you like to see this handled, or how would this go? I am confident that had she had a conversation with her dad to say, "Hey, Dad, when you pass, it's going to be hard for me, and I'm here. How do you think that's going to look? Would you expect that would look? And who's the company? Who am I going to deal with? Who do I got to talk to? And understand how that kind of mingles." That would have
Mhm.
helped her a lot. I think also what they were surprised by is whom the person he had named as his not fiduciary, but as his agent to act and executor. That person actually wasn't living any longer, and so they had passed away and didn't have an updated will, and that left everybody in a lurch for who was actually authorized to make those decisions at that point. They had to jump through, which left them to the state making those decisions and having to work through that. So those is that I mean, is that a one-off
Yeah,
type thing?
it's
Is that
someone's
something?
worst nightmare. Unfortunately, you just unpack scenario to scenario that like I've seen multiple times. And that's why I advocate so much of preparing for your soon to be caregiver.
Yeah,
Because it may not be that your kids come and talk to you about these things.
yeah,
You may have an adult kid that doesn't want anything to know about your financials,
yeah.
doesn't want to know anything, just wants you to take care of everything. And they don't want to know anything. I turned 16, about 16, and I'm an only child, and I told my parents, you better get your stuff together because when you die, I don't want to take care of it. And I didn't mean it from a mean way. It was more of like I was a teenager and I didn't want to be stuck alone
Yeah,
doing the process by myself.
right.
And so I said, figure it out, find the professionals to help you because I won't be able to do all of it by myself.
That's great. Before we go to our last commercial break, can I ask on that in finding professionals, if somebody's looking for a fiduciary to help manage that situation, maybe I'm not the one to manage this for mom and dad, right? Maybe I know a professional needs to do it. Maybe emotionally I'm not able, or maybe I've had 3 bankruptcies myself, and I'm not the best person to make these kinds of decisions where they come in. How would somebody find in their given state where they are? Is there a credential? How do you find a CFP or a fiduciary in general to help you with decisions like whether you should be doing something like this?
So there's several outlets of networking places where you can find financial advisors. There's NAPA, NAPFA.org. And then there's Let's Make a Plan on the CFP.org website.
Okay.
And then Financial Planning Association also has one as well. I think it's really important when looking for a financial professional to not only build that connection with them and understand who they are and how they'll be able to help you, but also understand their fee structure. Are they
Oh,
transparent? Are they, how are they going to help you? Because we have a lot of really good financial advisors, and in every industry, there's a couple bad apples, and you want to make sure that you're in a comfortable situation. You only have one shot to make or break your financials, and you want someone that you feel comfortable with that you can rely on.
I love that. I love I love understanding the gravity of that situation, interviewing a couple of people in particular, and having a couple in there and finding that connection. We're Look, we're going to come back after this with Danielle and just kind of wrap up in a summary of these high points that we've talked through today. On, are you looking to take over your parents' mortgage? Is it the thing that you want to do before death, after death? How it comes out? Stay tuned, and we'll give us a recap. And welcome back. Today, we're going to surmise and kind of wrap up our conversation with Danielle Miura, Spark Financial. She's in California, CFP. She's a fiduciary. She is a part of her own care team as a caretaker for a family member and her own loved one. She gets it. She wants it. She's capable of it. Again, Danielle, thanks for joining us today. We have we tackled down, and you've laid down. I've been kind of keeping our notes as we go through this. And I've got three great takeaways, and then one kind of a wrap around it. If I can maybe start to try to see if I can pull this in these things that you hit it out of the park that I really, really like. I think I'm going to start with one of the first things you kind of laid down to us is it's important to get the whole picture when you're coming into something like this. And in getting the whole picture, it's important for us to learn how to make place for the emotion, acknowledge that emotion, but try to set that emotion aside to understand the facts so that you're making as many decisions as possible on facts. Understand the details of what's the situation, what you think you know about that. Do you understand the full financial picture of where that question is in taking over the mortgage? How big that is, where that payment is. Is there one? Oh, look at this. We've got a second mortgage that actually comes out. So I'm not just taking this on, I'm taking on this second line of credit that we didn't think about that's tied to this particular mortgage or the value of it. And thinking through, I think one of the most important ones is once you understand the picture of that, looking, is this realistic? Is this a realistic thing to do? Is the house going to meet needs, or in order to make it the, dad's Alamo, am I going to are we going to have to put in another $100,000 into the house in order to have a suite downstairs for them, or a place to get around and to add ramps or whatever that might look for? Is this going to give us what we think? Is that anything, that first big segment that I seem to grasp that one pretty clearly?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Well, thank you. The second one that kind of really hit me between the eyes is this using the what if I die file, or even tax returns. We talked about both of those, utilizing those two situations to start drawing out information, to plant seeds of what conversations need to happen. It's a highly emotional conversation. It is really tough to ask my dad about a financial picture up front, because I am always going to be that 17-year-old kid who crashes car, 10 days after he got it, right? Kind of thing like that, right? Or whatever you might look for. It's difficult. I remember someone saying, not even Christ went home and was appreciated when he went back. There's this contempt that kind of happens with familiarity and with the relationships over time. And sometimes in advising your parents can be very difficult. So utilizing these types of proactive activities in order to start pulling stuff to account, like what are all the different accounts that you got to be tracking? If you're pulling for taxes, the W-2s, the 1099s, that starts giving you an idea of, where are resources? What is the picture? Where are they all at? And maybe, well, who's sending me those statements? Who's in charge of managing those funds? Who are the other people that you need to engage with to have a better big picture? And particularly in the what if I die file, we all know that has to happen. You shared that you had a conversation with your parents. Figure this out, because I don't want to figure this out. On the other side, I have learned from my parents, they don't want me to figure it out either. Like it really matters to them that I don't have to figure this out. And so when I can give them something productive and proactive to do, where they know it relieves that pressure off of them, that's almost always resulted in a pretty good thing. With a caveat, I think you and I talked about is if you're not the best person to do that, if you're the person who's had, without judgment from it, if you've had a couple of bankruptcies, right? Or you're going through a huge emotional crisis yourself at this particular time, you might not be the best person to approach this. Having another sibling approach this and just pull it all together for you, or engaging a CFP or a fiduciary or professional that can pull that together, maybe even just for that task of doing that, could be something that really benefits you. But again, that major aha is the utilizing these proactive activities to gather information and to pull it all together. Anything on that we could add?
Yeah. So any information you put together, even if it's, as you said, a bunch of documents in a box, is
Yeah.
an act of love.
I love that.
And
Yeah.
so when you're preparing and thinking about your soon-to-be caregiver, whether that's a professional or a family member, think to yourself, like, I'm doing this because I love this person, because I care about them, and I want them to have an easier time with my documents.
I explaining to and communicating that to your family is huge. I have learned people can put up with a heck of a lot of how when they know why you're doing something. And if you explain it to that, I think it is a great way for your parents to maybe even ask for it up front, for a little bit of grace. If when you come at it, it seems like a challenge to their autonomy, and just tackling it head on and saying, this is not where I'm coming from. I don't want control. I'm not trying to take control. I want you to remain in control as long as possible. I want to be here to find how to help you. When you're running those things down, that's great. And I love explaining to them that it's coming from that loving perspective, that it's an act of
And
love.
and then as the other part of the party receiving those documents, be willing and accepting to receive that information, because I'm sure there's many parents that are like, this is my box of documents. Like, this is for you. I created it for you.
Yeah,
And then the child goes, I don't want anything to do with that. And
totally.
so be willing on the other side to receive it,
Yeah.
and being accepting of that.
I think, yeah. As a kid, one of my best friends growing up, Tom Schroeder, his dad was an accountant. And I would remember it around tax time. People would bring in shoe boxes, like big shoe boxes too, like Michael Jordan sized shoe boxes. And they'd just be crammed full of everything that was this person's life. And he'd dump it out in one spot, and he'd start making his way through that. Now that might be when you want a professional to come in and do that for you. but that's what I see in my mind's eye, and that's great. Be willing to accept that. Sweet. Okay. Communication off of that, I think, is the third great major takeaway here. It's communication not only with your loved one there, but particularly if you're looking at taking over your parents' mortgage after they've passed away, communicating with all the parties on the other side. If you don't ask for it, it's never going to happen. I think in sales, they say something like you don't get 100% of the deals you don't try to close, right? Or you're going to get a no 100% of the time you don't try to ask to get a yes. There are a bunch of reasons to say it's worth doing it, one of the top ways in communicating, you talk about that communication counts. It counts in understanding details after the fact and pulling stuff out. Understanding that you know all of the facts. Was there somebody else on title? How was it titled? That may really unfold some stuff. But what I really liked was when you talked about just making that call to the mortgage company and explaining, hey, my loved one just died, and asking for a couple of months to process. I can't see, particularly if it's couched in a way of, I'm trying to make sure everybody doesn't fall apart on you, and I need to preserve the property. That is, as somebody who invests in properties, anytime a family member or somebody else steps in and says, by the way, the person paying you has passed away, I am a physical person, not a bank that sits someplace or some government executing, some level of probate. I'm a physical person who's here, and I'm trying to secure the property and ensure that the assets taken care of. I'm going to talk to you all day long. God bless you. I don't care if you I might not be able to tell you everything about the account because of my rules, but I sure as heck am going to be able to figure a way out to make you like a multiplier of success for me, because remember, that house is what they're holding in collateral. They need it to be taken care of. They need it to be locked up and secured, and they need that food. They need all that taken out of the refrigerator because they don't need pests and animals and all that other stuff that comes. A house is a living, breathing thing. And this is a time where you could use that fact as wind at your back. And so I really love that you talked about communication of just kind of that basic thing, not being afraid to go to do it. Grab a statement, pick up the phone. You might not know I think you said you might not know anything more than the slip of paper and what the account number is and when they pay it and how much. Go with it. Make a phone call and do it. Anything else around there we should be thinking about?
Yeah, they may seem like big bad banks, but they're humans too, and they don't want to probably go through the process of foreclosure.
Right.
And a lot of banks are willing to work with you if you come through, as you said, with a heartfelt message of, I really want to take care of this property, but I need some time for myself as a griever to take care of it.
There's not a lot that I really loved about 2008 to 2010 financial crisis on the housing side, but one thing I do really like as someone who advises and works with families is that banks figured that out. Mortgage companies figured that out. Like, they had to figure out workouts, and they had to start looking at people as human beings. And so they've got the processes there. The person you're going to get on the phone has a parent. 100% of us have had parents, right? We're lucky if we still do. And chances are you're going to be able to reach in and touch that. So it's a great thing to lay out. If you don't have a plan, you laid out to us the Let's Make a Plan website with some national associations. We'll include that down in the show notes down below. We'll get that from you if we could. And Jason, we can add that down on the bottom. But other than that, parting ways. Any last second advice or something over this? Until I expect to have you back on the show, because we have a lot of places we could go with this. But anything apart from you that we should be thinking about?
So I would say take it day by day.
Okay.
You don't have to make the decision to take over the mortgage that same day, but don't wait to take care of it. Don't wait a month out. You have to eventually deal with the problem. So just don't feel like you have to immediately tackle the issue. Take time to really process and think and sleep on it before you make a decision.
Brilliant. And with that, all I can do is really just thank you profoundly for coming onto the show with us this week and sharing your time, your talents, and your treasures with us and our audience. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for the team this week, and thanks for joining us. If you've enjoyed the content, remember to subscribe and to share this episode on the app that you're using right now. Your reviews and your comments, they really help us expand our reach as well as our perspective. So if you have time, also drop us a note. Let us know how we're doing. For tips and tools to clarify your parent project, simplify communication with your stakeholders, and verify the professionals that you choose, you can find us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Thanks again for trusting us. Until our next episode, behold and be held.
Thank you for listening to this Parent Projects podcast production. To access our show notes, resources, or forums, join us on your favorite social media platform or go to parentprojects.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Family Media and Technology Group Incorporated and Parent Projects LLC. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcast.